The floor is yours, Lee.
Oh, okay. Um, I'm unmuted. Let me check all my boxes. I'm unmuted. You can see me. um, I am happy to make this pretty conservational. Look at me. Conversational is what I meant. Make it conversational and conservational if we like. Um, during the hour we have together, I'll have my slides up. I'll be able to see you along the side, but maybe not all of you. So do feel free to jump in and start asking a question or ask me to clarify, because it's hard to do everything at once and be able to watch chat and see if anyone has their hand up. So I'm perfectly happy if you just jump in and ask me to answer a question, or what have you. I have a lot of content, and I have sent Lauren the slide deck only just a little while ago, so she may not even have opened her email yet, but you'll get all of that. And near the end of it is a little bit of a case study. If we don't get to that while we're talking, that's fine. It's a case study about a humane society. So it's not completely relevant to you, but the principles are. So the principles of how they talked about their organization and how they built community. Some of those guiding principles are relevant to any organization. So if we don't get to it, that's okay, because I've given you a link to download the case for support, and there are some notes in the slides. So don't worry about it if we get to talking. That getting to talking is more important than me reading you a bunch of a slide deck. Does that make sense? Much rather talk about individual scenarios. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here. Let me find my PowerPoint. There we go. Okay. Now, your first question is, why on earth is someone from the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Ottawa talking to us today? Some days I wake up and wonder myself what I'm doing here. But let me just start by telling you a wee bit about myself. I've been at the Faculty of Medicine up here at the University of Ottawa for about 7 months. As you may be able to see there at the top, the University of Ottawa it's the world's largest bilingual university, French English, and I have a passion for healthcare and the environment, both of those things together. In fact, one of the University of Ottawa, the medicine's biggest projects is global health. So the impact of climate change on our health and the impact of our healthcare, so hospitals, medical procedures on climate change.
Wait,
Yeah.
we're not seeing the screen. It says
Oh, you're
that
not?
it's starting to share the
Oh,
screen, but it's not actually
okay.
sharing. So
Okay, it says it's paused for some reason. So let me stop share and try again. You weren't missing much. It was just a picture of me jumping up and down in the snow. So let me try again. Why would my screen sharing be paused? Let's see if it gives me a little message.
it's doing the same thing. If not, I have
Yeah.
the presentation.
Hmm. Oh, wait. Ah, it won't let me share it for some reason. I click on resume share and it won't restart. So I might have to rely on you, Lauren, to pull that up for me.
Let's see. Let's see what we can do. Let's cross our fingers
Yeah.
many times. Let me get this popped on the screen. I just had it.
All the wonders of technology. You'd think we would have it all straight by now, wouldn't you?
There we go. It says it's
Ah,
loading.
that
Can you
looks
see it?
better.
Yay! All
Yeah,
right.
you might have to shrink it down a bit so it fits on the screen. How's that look for everybody? Better? Okay, now you see what I was talking about when I said you might be wondering why I've got a Faculty of Medicine thing. Now you know. And you can just go ahead to the next one, Lauren. So there's some pictures of the real me who loves nature. We have a cabin out in the woods. And I love both healthcare. No, I don't like going to the hospital. That's not what I mean. I love improving healthcare, and I'm passionate about healthcare philanthropy and making the world a little safer and perhaps a little more manageable in terms of getting better if one is sick, and avoiding illness in the future for my family. And the same words could be said about our environment. So right now I'm in medicine, and sometimes the crossover with the environment. But I was also the former National Director of Development of the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, which is the organization up here in Canada that protects and works on expanding our national park system. So nature is very much my happy place. You can go ahead. So I have believed for a long time, I'm certainly not the only one who believes this, that cases for support have become completely different. I would say certainly in the last 10 years. They used to be, and you may be familiar with these sort of long documents of 20 or 30 pages that were all words and sometimes a few photos thrown in, and they were kind of everything but the kitchen sink. You'd have your history in there of your organization. You'd have long lists of all your board members and every volunteer and your financial statements, and they would just contain everything. And it was sometimes awfully hard to figure out what the point was when you were reading them. I'm sure a few of you are familiar with those look like. You may have a few dusty ones even sitting around your office. I know I've come across a few during my career. And they worked. I mean, they were useful for the time, but they don't tend to work these days. And the reason is that we've become more and more knowledgeable about the human brain. At least that's my argument. We know more and more about how people make decisions. We know more and more about what inspires people to give. And as a result, the case for support has become something a little different. And when I do cases, and that's what I have before joining the Faculty of Medicine, I spent 18 years specializing in cases for support. So I had a lot of practice in terms of putting together cases for support that sometimes didn't, but mostly did work really well when it came to raising money for my clients and for the organizations I volunteered for, which I was raising money for. So the most successful cases for support these days tend to focus on inspiring the donor and prospect, inspiring them to give. Their sole focus is inspiration. You can go ahead. Next one. So I pretty much answered my own question, but a case for support really is the rallying cry. It's meant to kind of get your heart pumping, get everyone singing off the same song sheet. It is not necessarily long. It has your board members understand it, your staff understand it, your donors understand it. It's not complex. Keep going. And the best cases for support focus on the why of what you do rather than the how. And you've probably all heard this before. If you've been, if you're fundraising, we want to focus on why. Why do we do what we do? Not the mechanics of how we do it. So why would we want to extend a national park? As opposed to the how. Well, how are we going to do it? Well, we might buy up this plot of land, and nobody cares so much about that as to the why. Why are we going to do it? Well, because the trees are being cut down along this whole side of the national park, et cetera, et cetera. And otherwise might include animal habitat, might talk about biodiversity, things like that. Or if in simple terms, why, if you're needing to put up a new building, donors don't care about how many bricks you need to buy and how many labor hours it's going to take. They care about what the impact of having that new building will be on children's environmental education, for example. How many more children will be able to go through your programs? It's not rocket science, and we've heard it before, but the case for support is the document and the words that are going to answer the question why, not how. Okay. And because we want to answer the question why, we want the case for support really to touch people on an emotional level. The why is inspiring. Again, I'm talking about inspirational language, and we want it to touch people's hearts, not get stuck in their heads. How language tends to get stuck in people's heads. It's not emotional. It's not. It tends to get caught up in facts and figures. And they've actually done a lot of research showing that if you start putting numbers into your stories, into your narrative, into your documents, it almost causes like a speed bump in people's brains. They have to stop and think, and it will actually depress response. Any of you who might send out e-appeals or direct mail appeals probably will have heard this before. As soon as you start putting numbers like your gift will help 1,000 X, fill in the blank, as soon as you do that, your response rates will go down. We're just not programmed to be able to figure numbers out. 1,000 is meaningless to us. We deal in individual things. We can grasp the concept of one person. We can grasp the concept of a tree. We can't grasp the concept of 10,000 trees. So again, we want to force people to feel, not think. Okay, go ahead. And when you're thinking about stories, and this certainly applies to a case for support, but is broadly applicable too, the best stories kind of surprise the reader. I'll sure you agree with me when I say, too often I open something, whether it's an email, whether it's opening a web page, whether it's looking at a printed case for support. Often the first thing I see is message from the executive director. Now, I won't make you put up your hand if that's at the front of the stuff you do. I won't make you put up your hand, but often it's the first thing I see. Or sometimes it's the only thing I see. I've worked with organizations where every single thing they send out is from the executive director. And it doesn't surprise and delight. There are so many stories to be told. You can tell your founding story. If you're a younger organization, get your founders to tell their own story. Donors can tell their stories. Beneficiaries of your work, unless you're purely helping trees or water, that even there's a way to tell their stories. But you can have children talking about what they've learned out in nature, for example, impact stories, vision stories. Your own stories can be fascinating. Often there's an amazing story behind why you're doing what you do. I've crossed out message from the CEO, but you'll see an alternative way to tell that. Get very creative. So if you can skip to the next one. Okay, so I lied. I do have some messages from CEOs. This is This is an unpublished, as of yet, as far as I know, case for support for the Southern Appalachian Highlands conservation. I'm going to get it wrong. My brain is a little off today in terms of my memory. But you can see that there are two testimonials. So neither one wrote a long letter from the executive director or letter from the associate director. All there are in this case for support are these little snippets. And you can see that they're not what you would typically think to hear of from an executive director. If you can read them, and I'll just read Christie's quickly because it's short. In nature, I find both belonging and becoming, and it's important for everyone to have the opportunity to experience that. It can change people's lives. Just simple. So she's telling her own story. And so is Carl beside her. They're telling their own stories. They're not putting out the history or the vision or the stats and the figures around the organization. They're speaking from their heart. And that has a huge impact. You can do the next one as well. Here's another very creative way to tell a story. This is an impact story from a turtle. It even has little turtle footprints on it. So this is a story from a Blendings turtle. And I won't read it. You can read it once you download, but it really, the message is to be creative. And again, this can be lovely in a case for support, because in a case for support, you do want to talk about impact. One of the messages you want to have in your case for support is that you have been good stewards of donors' dollars, that donor dollars have had an impact, and future donor dollars will also have an impact. That you can be trusted, and that you're a good investment, right? So having some of those impact stories can be pretty powerful. The case study that I have near the end is quite a lovely one, because the stories included in there are almost all written by animals. So there's a love story from a cat to her owner. There's a love story from a dog to the two kids in his new family. Just very, again, I use the word surprise and delight, things you would not expect. So don't be afraid to take those little risks. Okay, go ahead. So one of the unique things about storytelling when you're doing a case for support is you tend to include more than one story. And throughout the complete narrative of a case for support, and I tend to write fairly short ones, so somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 words. Although you can do, depending on what your purpose is, you can do much shorter and not much longer, but you might, if it's for your website, you might want to do just a part of that. But usually my base case is 1,500 to 2,000 words. And I want to be careful to have a narrative thread throughout that narrative. So I may have a couple of stories, but I want them to connect in some way, shape, or form. So you want to be very thoughtful about what that thread might be, that ties everything together. And you don't want to get outside it. It might be tempting because you might have, 5 great stories, but you want to be sure that, okay, just these 2 are the closest to that thread. So we'll use these 2, and the other 3 can be used somewhere else. What to include in your case. This is sort of your table of contents. Again, this is all from my perspective, and having spent a lot of time writing cases for support, most of them are successful. And I'm always open to other opinions and ways of looking at things. So don't hesitate to ask questions or offer a different approach. I truly believe that a very emotional and powerful opening statement, opening sentence is critical. If people can't get past the first sentence or two, they're not going to keep reading. The other thing I've found is I've often written that emotional, powerful opening in my second or third paragraph. Once I get writing, I can often take away the first few sentences, and there's my powerful first sentence. And I've seen that in work writing that I've kind of critiqued as well. It happens so often. I can just cross out those first few sentences, and there's the first sentence. It's amazing how that works. It's almost like we're, we need a little warm up to get going, a little kick in the pants, and then there's the first sentence. A mission and vision should be in the case for support, but not in those blocks. Our vision is this, our mission is this, as you would put them on your wall, but rather, creatively through story. So through someone talking about the vision, as they would if they were giving a speech, or talking about the mission as they would were they having a one-on-one conversation. So in a much more natural format, or giving an illustration of it by story. Your history of impact, I would include, but keep it brief. You can do it by way of a founding story as well. You obviously want to talk about the problems that need solutions. You exist for a reason. So you want to talk about what those issues are. And you want to talk about what your solutions to those problems are. You want to include a sense of urgency. Now, I know for environmental nonprofits that, we aren't cancer organizations. Some of the solutions are longer term. So again, we need to really think about the urgency. And I think, with climate change and so on, the urgency can be quite easy to find. We do have to remember that we're not speaking to the general public. We're speaking to people who already understand how important the environment and nature are. And it helps to keep that in mind. You're not trying to get every single person in the general public to become a donor. You're speaking to a certain audience who already gets it for the most part, right? You're not cold calling people. So when I'm speaking to organizations that who think they don't necessarily have that urgency, so whether it be for a super rare disease, whether it's for an environmental group or something else that's, seemingly non-urgent, I just remind people, well, there are a group of potential donors and donors who really care about you, and they understand the issue. So you're not going to get everybody, but you will get the people who care. And then a call to action is really important in your case for support. So that call to action means, that's answering the question, what next? And essentially what's next in a case for support, it's inspiring them. I want people to finish reading my case for support and be sitting up in their chair and be saying, okay, who do I call? How do I get involved? I don't necessarily want them to pull out their wallet right then and there, because I haven't asked them for money yet, right? I want them, because I haven't, that's what a proposal's for. I've separated out the case for support from the proposal. They used to go together 10 years ago, where you'd put all the money on the table. You see crossed out purchase options. Those original cases for support, you may remember they had all the purchase options. We're trying to raise $100,000. $50,000 will buy this. $5,000 will buy this. And we don't do that anymore because our asks are so customized to each person. So our case for support inspires them, gets them stepping in to the conversation. And we then have a conversation. Let's find out what they're interested in. What in the case for support, what in this document you've just read really got you excited? Tell me more about that. Can we take you out for a visit? Can we, have some conversations? And then, after maybe 3 or 4 conversations, you're ready to say, well, would you like to invest in this? Would you like to become our partner in this? And that's where the ask comes in. So it's not right away. And please jump in if if you've found different. But I've always raised way more money doing it that way than I have by presenting them with a list of purchase options, and because they will tend to go lower than they can actually give if they're given a list. But if I do it through conversation, I've always raised more money. Thank you, Lauren. You're anticipating me now. And the best cases talk less about your organization and more about the donors and the beneficiaries themselves. So you're using a lot of you in it and not a lot about, us, we, as an organization. Because ultimately, donors and prospective donors they're giving through you, not to you, to solve a problem. So, when in my writing, I tend to focus a whole lot on what the issues are, what donors have already helped you solve, and in the past, so a lot of thank you and gratitude, and then a big but, there's still a big problem to solve, or we need to do more. We're not there yet. And the organization itself becomes a little piece of the story, just a tiny little piece of the story, if that makes sense. Go ahead. So I'll just talk briefly about this because I think cases for support can be quite an incredible stewardship and cultivation tool, and often we don't think of them as that way, in that way. So go ahead, Lauren. So I'll bring in quickly this Regina Humane Society. You're probably all wondering where Regina is, right? Does anybody know where Regina is? No, yeah, I know nobody's heard of Regina. So Regina is the capital city of Saskatchewan, which is in the middle of Canada. It's very, very snowy and cold. And the Regina Humane Society, you know what a Humane Society is. So this, I love this organization. So they had this Humane Society in this awful old building that was full of mildew and rats and mice and just a horrible building for animals. And they decided to start this campaign for a new building with a case for support. And so I'll try to be quick. I went in before they even organized anything. They just knew they needed a new building because it was being condemned. And so I went in and I flew in. It was the middle of winter. I ended up stuck there for a week because it snowed so much I couldn't get out. And it was really awful. Awful for the weather, nice because the people are so awesome there. But so I spent a week there interviewing people for the case for support. And they didn't exactly know. They knew they needed a new building. Everybody agreed they needed a new building. And this is a picture of me. I was loving on all the pets as I did these interviews. And the pet that I'm loving on is the woman in the middle, Leanne Black. That's her apartment and her cat. And her husband's Donald Black, who's also pictured there. And you can see they are honorary campaign chairs. But when I went, the campaign cabinet and the campaign chairs had not been chosen yet. So I did all these interviews. I wrote the case for support. It all ended up being love letters, like from animals to their owners. And it was so cute, slightly cheesy, but cheesy works. And that case for support, they ended up using it as a stewardship and cultivation tool. And they used it to recruit their campaign cabinet and the campaign chairs, their honorary chairs. And before their campaign cabinet had even met, they'd raised 60% of their goal, which was $27 million. So they used that case. They would walk around with it and visit with the pets, sit in people's apartments and homes, and love on the pets, and give this case and say, you know, talk them through it and talk about the old building, take people through the old building and say, look what we're going to do for our pets. This new place is beautiful. It's a community center. Cats will have their own space. They won't be in with 5 other cats. And anyway, just amazing how you can use that as a tool to get people inspired. Like the meetings, I was in tears during these interviews, learning the stories of these abused animals that, you know, then found their forever homes. But it was an amazing way of doing it. Normally you don't start with a case for support if you're trying to raise money like they were doing. Now that's a case for support for a building. A lot of cases for support are just an organizational case for support. So this is, you know, a bit different. And I'm not sure any of you are trying to raise $27 million. Maybe you are. But the principle is still the same, is, you know, go in and love on the donors and care about what they care about. Use drafts, case for support, and get their thoughts on it. You know, the saying, when you want money, ask for advice, and when you want advice, ask for money. A draft case for support is a great way to go and ask for advice. Go ahead, Lauren. Getting interviews from people. This is just some of my tips. Sitting down with donors, sitting down with people who've been impacted by programs, parents. You know, you gave me a bit of a sense of the organizations you work with, and I don't know all your programs, but I imagine volunteers would be great people to interview, board members, retired folks, getting them to talk and share their stories. I just imagine the stories they would tell. So these are just some of my tips and tricks. Some of these people you may know so very well, but you know, sometimes with donors who you don't know very well, some of these tricks can work really well. Just listen. You've got 2 ears and a mouth for a reason. Go ahead. I think I've got 3 pages of questions, which I'll just leave with you. We don't need to read these, so you can just quickly go through these pages. Tried and true, all these questions. That one's the best, right at the end. Is there anything you'd like to add? I usually get my best stuff on that question. You can go ahead. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about actually getting ready to write. So gathering background, whether I'm in an organization like I am now, Faculty of Medicine, or outside, and everyone's a little different, how they study, how they're right, how you studied at school is a pretty good indication of how you'll put this together. So I'm the kind of person that likes to have everything around me, and some people like to have it all digitally in folders. I like a combo, and I like to gather it all and have it on folders on my desktop, or at least the aliases. So I know it's right there. I don't have to find anything. I reread everything, even if I've read it before. So it's right there. I'm taking notes. I'm looking for old photos. This one on the right is a fun one. I did a case for support for Ottawa Riverkeeper here in town, which wanted to raise money to restore this old historic river house and turn it into, Ottawa is Canada's capital city. Everyone thinks it's Toronto, but it's not. And this old river house, they wanted to turn it into the Ottawa River's embassy. You know, along with all the other embassies, they felt the Ottawa River should have an embassy. And they were successful. That's down below is the picture of what it looks like today. So all that historic information on that old river house, of course, became part of their case for support, reminding people of that was like the preeminent swimming hole going back decades. Everybody beyond a certain age remembered going there, and nothing like touching on the heartstrings. So doing all the interviews, some of them for gathering information, some for stories. I just like having everything at my fingertips. Go ahead. And collecting visuals, the human brain processes images 60,000 times faster than text. So more and more when I'm doing a case for support, and whether I'm going to use it on the web or use it in a brochure or in an email, I'm using a lot of visuals these days. And it can be helpful when we're talking about environmental issues. Like in this case, I wanted to show you this visual because this one would be so hard to illustrate in words. It's very hard to illustrate in words. This is the Trans-Canada Trail organization. And it's really hard to describe in words what a trail looks like that goes from coast to coast to coast, right? You need to see a picture of it. And I'm not a graphic designer. I might have done it a little differently because it's still hard to see, but that's a graphic designer issue, not a writer's issue. But some things that are vast when we're talking about nature or conservation are just so much easier to see rather than to read. And so using kind of infographics or just a really good illustration can be much more powerful than words. Go ahead. I always create a bit of a brief. This is a good opportunity too to share something around with the rest of your team and with some trusted people outside, just giving them a sense of kind of where you're headed, or if there's two of you, where the two of you are headed, kind of a bullet point outline of the case for support. What are going to be some of your key points? What's the narrative thread? What sort of visuals are needed from other people, perhaps? You need to get some photography done. So start putting a shot list together. Again, share that around so you start getting buy-in. That'll really help at this point. Nothing worse than doing a whole case for support and then having it cut down and thrown in the garbage once it's all done. It's happened to me. Another recommendation is try not to let many chefs in the kitchen. It kills the creativity, and it turns something that's spectacular into something super mediocre every single time. I always say, if ideally when I'm working with a client, which I don't do anymore, I would try to get the executive director and the person in charge of fundraising. That would be ideal. Maybe one other person. The executive director or CEO and the person in charge of fundraising are the experts. Maybe, if you're big enough, maybe a marketing communications person. That's it. Everyone else is just giving their opinions, right? Otherwise, it just starts becoming mediocre because people just give their ideas and opinions, and everything just gets watered down. And go ahead. And I'm a very visual person, so if this is going to end up as a printed document, I start mapping it out a bit, where I think a photo would go and where the different sections will go, and it's all again thinking of that narrative thread. How will it flow together and make sense? Again, everyone has their own process. That's just how I do it. And sometimes everything's just done in MS Word, and there's no pictures, and pieces are just taken and put other places. So this is how it works for me if it's going to be a document. And then you just start writing. The very hardest part of a case for support is writing the first sentence. Absolutely. So I just I just start writing, knowing that probably my third or fourth sentence will be my best sentence. So that helps me start writing a bit, knowing that it's not going to start as my best work. I tend to kind of put my file folders, whether it's on my computer, sometimes I have hard copy, into sections. So if I know I'm going to write, a half a page or a page about the history of the organization, I'll make a folder called history, and I'll have dumped things in there as I go, whether it's a snippet from a conversation. I might have another page that's impact stories, and I'll push stuff in there, and I'll work on one section at a time. That's just the way I do my writing. I've been doing it like that since I was in school. So it's habit. Other people might have a different way of doing it. As you're writing, it's nice to have a trusted person to bounce ideas around with, or to read drafts. And again, there's nothing worse than getting to the end and realizing you're so off track that it's just not going to work. That's why it's, like I said, if it's executive director, person in charge of fundraising, maybe one other person, then whoever's doing the writing can be constantly sharing, just to be sure you're on the right track. Good. Okay, well, I'm going to pause there. I'm pausing here because the rest is kind of the case study, and to see if there's questions. I see there's something in the chat oh, it was all about the PowerPoint, but I want to pause just to see. There might be questions, there might be comments, and I want to get through that before I do any of the rest of it.
I had a question.
Oh, okay, perfect.
So when you're writing, how do you envision the fact that sometimes that case for support will translate to something verbal and a conversation? Like, should the board all know kind of those opening sentences, or not to be too rehearsed, but how do you align those two?
So I would typically, what I do is I wait till the case is done, and then I would present it to the board. So you may have a board chair who kind of ticks off yes to it. I've run into huge issues if the entire board has to approve it. I highly don't recommend that. Really don't. They're all going to have a different opinion, and they're all going to want to change something. You folks are the experts, but it's better to finish it and then provide them with a copy and do a short presentation on kind of some of the key points. So, here's the few of the key messages. Here's how you can use the case. So you can talk to them about different ways they can use it. You can use the whole thing if you like, if you're talking to someone who you think might be interested in supporting us. Please read it thoroughly, maybe a few times, and practice when you're talking to people. Practice, like, you don't need to memorize it, but practice using some of those words and telling some of the stories that are in there. And if you need more stories, we can provide them. But you're right, you want it to be very natural and their own in their own words, right? One thing I do often do when I'm writing a case for support is I'll make it clear that we're only using a few stories, but sometimes I will interview every board member in order to get their thoughts. I might say, what do you think we should include? What's your vision for the organization? Why did you join the board? It's almost like interviews for political reasons, I call them. And it gets a little buy-in. And it helps make presenting the end product to them a little easier, because they all feel like they have a bit of a foot in the game. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's interviews you do because they're actually going to help the case for support. And then sometimes there's interviews you do because it's going to help you.
I have a question too.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your slide and the message about, facts are daunting and you need to go with emotions
Yeah.
and people can't relate to things. In our case, we are a land trust. So what we do is preserve land and we keep this running ticker. And it's so important to say how many
Yes.
acres and how many acres are left and the impact. But we also know that it's hard to understand the size. So we're always trying to come up with creative ways
Yeah.
to explain, like, that's 4 central parks, or that's the size of this township in our county. And there's silly examples you see in the news of like 6 Taylor Swifts. It's, whatever
Yes.
they use. It's almost kind of a game, which maybe catches attention. But is that the right answer to try to
Yes.
continue? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, you're doing the right thing. And
Okay.
that's all you can do is compare it to something they can wrap their heads around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, they can
Yeah.
picture an area of land, like, whether
Right.
it's
Or like
their
football fields,
state or a football
different
field, or
things.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
exactly. They can't figure out what, hectares or acres or miles. I mean, this you have to make everything relatable. It's about
Yes.
making it relatable.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And then sort of related to that, we also struggle where we don't have cute kittens and puppies, or we don't
Yeah,
have little
of course.
children, and like, it's land and it's very important and it impacts all of us. But even a lot of the times our visuals are nature, and we try to put pictures of animals, but it's mainly about the land.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Sometimes I just filled out a grant report and they wanted a testimonial of how we impacted a human. Ugh. I can do that. And we try to get people we know to share how this park made their life better and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But it's just a little, I guess, and maybe this applies to a lot of us, but I wonder when you're dealing with land and the environment,
Yeah.
it's, I don't know, the visuals, and if there's any other way to bring the human side of it in from your perspective.
Well, and it's about what nature means to people's lives. I mean, I already hold it in my heart, so it's more easy. It's easier when
Yeah.
people hold it in
Yeah.
their hearts already, right? So, you can even interview a few people just on that and capture some testimonials, like talking about the feeling people have of digging their hands in the dirt in spring, or that feeling of that silence on a lake except for their paddle, or of the wind rustling through the leaves as they're going on a hike, like how that feels inside them and what it does to their mind, right? Like, I mean, it's not probably too late to talk about like the mental health aspects during the pandemic, and kind of tie some of that just about how healthy it is for people. There's all sorts of research around that. The more natural land we have, the better our health. There's a direct link. So, tying that with some direct testimonials from some people who have experienced that, I think would be pretty powerful.
Thank you. That's so helpful.
Yeah, no problem. I'm speaking from experience. I think nature saved my life over the last 4 years, to be honest. Can we all agree? Yes. Yes, you can definitely, if we want to skip, we can skip way ahead, Lauren, to my contact information, and there's a couple of resources too. So you can just look at this at your own leisure. Keep going, keep going. Da, da, da. There. So there's a couple of websites. So did I spell them right? Yes. Both those websites have lots of cases for support, good ones on them. You can find lots of bad ones out there. So when you get the slide deck, you'll see both of those. So Blue Canoe Philanthropy is mine. That's my consulting firm that I don't work at anymore. Well, it's still up, but it's where I was working until November when I joined the faculty. It's still up. The Case Writers is a collective of case writers. So I have some things up there, and so do a bunch of other great case writers, and we all kind of write and have the same philosophy about writing. And then I think the next slide is all my contact information, so you can feel free to send me an email, and I will try to answer quickly. I'll do my best. I'm having a knee replacement next week, so it depends on. I'm a little busy, but if there's a sudden break in communication, it's because I'm in pain. And as soon as I'm feeling better, I'll write back.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thanks. It's the end goal. I'm focused on the end goal. Any other questions? I hope this has been helpful. I know it's a daunting task, but it's a question of just carving it out in pieces. You know, information gathering. If it helps, I spend usually 85% of the time just gathering information and 15% writing.
And what percent do you spend interviewing?
Probably 25 or 30% of that time. And most of that is just trying to pin people down to talk to me. Yeah. I love interviewing people. It's my favorite part.
Yeah, I mean, I would think I wouldn't want to stop doing that part. That would be harder to get to the writing.
It's just, yeah, just the things you learn about people and the stories they're willing to tell you. It's like a gift.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
As mentioned, we are going to send out the recording as well as the materials.
Great.
And Lee, best of luck with your surgery.
Thank you.
Excited to hear how it all goes.
Yeah, I want to get back in my canoe. Haven't been able to get in it because of my knee.
Yeah, we definitely need to see you back in the canoe with a photo of you in the canoe. Well, we'll meet again. Karen's going to provide a little bit additional information about our in-person experience, and as well as additional information on what we're doing going forward in terms of our schedule. We have a bunch of things going on, and then still working on the end of the year, waiting to hear back from a few of the speakers. CCS will be joining us again. And Denise, I'm not sure if they're going to join us during the time we're at Frelinghuysen Arboretum or not. We're still working on that. There's some people who are on maternity leave from their organization, but that'll be an update if it does happen in person. It'll be an update about the current philanthropic trends that they were putting together. And if not, we'll hear from them in January again. So whichever. We'd like to hear an update on 2024. If not, we'll hear at another time. I look forward to seeing you all and be on the lookout for messages.
Yeah, thank you.
Enjoy, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.